Welcome back, Troglodytes, to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we have a 2006 Gibson Nick Lucas reissue acoustic guitar. But before we dive into this, how does this guitar relate to SpongeBob? Where's the correlation here between a guitar that was initially built in the late 1920s for a famous musician? How does that relate to SpongeBob? Here's how. Nick Lucas, the guy that kind of helped design this guitar, it was his own signature model. He was basically the first jazz guitarist to record as a soloist. His most popular / theme song was Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Now this guy kind of has an old-timey feel to him, so his songs were very simple but tasteful, and he was very popular in the 1920s through about the 1970s really. But towards the end of his career, he became friends with a guy named Tiny Tim. Now Tiny Tim is fairly famous for covering other people's songs, and if you've heard Tiptoe Through the Tulips before, you might have heard Tiny Tim's rendition of that song.
Come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
And Tiny Tim also covered a song sung by Maurice Chevalier that was written by Al Sherman and Al Lewis for a 1930 film called The Big Pond. Now, what is that song? Well, it's living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. That song was famously featured on the very first episode of Spongebob Squarepants, the one that started it all. Basically, to recap what that episode is about, SpongeBob's trying to get a job at the Krusty Krab. He's been waiting his whole life for this moment. And when he gets there, Mr. Krabs and Squidward, they're like, this guy's no good for us. Let's go send him on a ridiculous hunt for a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments with turbo drive. Now, when they thought they lost him forever, a bunch of anchovies showed up and they were really hungry, and they were basically gonna tear down the restaurant because of how hungry they were. So right when Mr. Krabs and Squidward thought they were going to be killed by these anchovies, here comes SpongeBob flying in with his hydrodynamic spatula. But it's during the scene where SpongeBob is making all the food that Living in the Sunlight, Loving in the Moonlight is playing. So that's how you get from Nick Lucas, a famous jazz guitarist, to SpongeBob. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and learn about this guitar. This guitar was first released in 1927, and it had an 11-year run all the way through 1938. This was the very first artist-endorsed signature model. So before the Les Paul being endorsed by Les Paul, and before Slash and anybody else, this was the very first signature guitar, and it was called the Nick Lucas Special. Now you can see here in the sound hole, this one says Nick Lucas Reissue. The original ones look pretty much just like that, but they say Special instead of Reissue. So this guitar in itself kind of varied from year to year. When it was first introduced in 1927, it had more of the L1 shape. They're kind of funky looking guitars, and it only had 12 frets. Now, I'm not saying only 12 frets on the entire neck. I'm talking only 12 frets, that's kind of where it joined to the body. And those ones had the spruce top with mahogany sides. So that was kind of the first iteration of the Nick Lucas Special. And then in 1930, Gibson changed it. They gave it this body shape. This is like the L00 shape. And then it increased from a 12 fret model to a 13 fret model. And then despite what the catalogs say, the sides were actually rosewood on those guitars. Apparently these 13 fret ones are the most desirable of them all. I guess it puts the bridge at just the sweet spot on the body. I've never tried one, but that's what I was reading up online about. And that iteration lasted until 1934. You get a guitar that looks pretty much just like this one for the most part. Once again, they added another fret, so you have a 14 fret model. And then they decided to introduce maple sides. So this guitar went through a bunch of changes until it was finally discontinued. But what is the one thing that all those iterations have in common is that these are kind of a small-bodied guitar. Look how thick they are. This is a 4.5-inch deep body, so it gives you that projection of a larger acoustic guitar. But you don't have to have a massive guitar this way. It still feels pretty large though. So I could see as a singer and guitar player being a soloist why a smaller bodied guitar would be better. But this thing really has some great bass tones to it, and it really captures the high ends really well too. So this particular guitar was custom ordered in 2006. What you're going to notice about this one is it's pretty much a version 3, but with one major difference. This one was ordered with mahogany back and sides. This style of Nick Lucas reissue guitar would normally have maple, so that kind of puts this one on its own category. And you're probably wondering, hey, why do you have an acoustic guitar on your channel? You don't do too many of those, let alone a high-end one. Well, this guitar, I actually took it in as a trade because somebody had to have the most famous guitar on my channel, the re-necked 76 Les Paul Custom. But the owner of this guitar, it was the only way he could afford to get that guitar, and he seemed to love it so much, he said he would come home every day like he would have the urge to watch the video. So it's like, that is the right home for this guitar, so I kind of took a slight calculated risk taking this guitar in, but I thought, you know, since it has the SpongeBob tie and it gives me the opportunity to learn something new, I thought it'd be worthwhile, and I hope you guys kind of learned something as well. So before having one of these in person and looking up the history behind this guitar, as well as some of Nick Lucas's work, I finally understand what people see in these kind of weird acoustic guitars. Listening to Mr. Lucas's work, you can see how his work influenced so many other people, and honestly, his voice kind of sounds like Tiny Tim's, but a little bit more traditional. So the next time you go to a guitar store and you see one of these, if you look at it and go, hey, that's the SpongeBob guitar, I'll be very proud of you, and I've done my job well. So definitely check one of these out. I actually had a great time playing this once I actually sat down and played it for a while. The acoustic tones are great, but what's kind of cool about this one being modern is it does have a built-in pickup, so I was able to plug it in for a tone demonstration as well. So let's go ahead and hear how this beautiful acoustic guitar sounds. Now that we know how this guitar sounds, let's go ahead and review the condition of this guitar. The thing I like about this is it was a custom ordered guitar and it actually got played for once. Sometimes you'll find custom orders that didn't get played, but this one, it's got all the blemishes to prove that it's a great player. Now on the face of the headstock you don't see too much. You've got some light string change wear, polishing scratches, but it's along the edges where you can see some light dings against something, especially like right here. It's a little bit of an eyesore while you're playing the guitar, but it's not too bad. You also have an area right here where the lacquer's kind of been worn off, likely by a stand. You can kind of see that on both sides of the neck. You have a beautiful rosewood fretboard on this one, and again, your own special inlays. I think these inlays are pretty cool. And the frets really don't show any major wear. I mean, they've got a very tiny little amount, but it's very close to new frets on this one. But check out this binding. I like that it has this black line running up and down it. It kind of gives it a more high-end feel. Now onto the face of the guitar. This kind of has a few oopsie moments on it, where like the case came down on it and gave it some scratches and some light dings. On the top here, you're in pretty good shape. Just your picking scratches and light wear and tear. But it's right here where the case came down and doop, it made a big indentation at some point in time. Now it's not always apparent, but when you get it in the light just right, it's definitely there. You've got a few examples of that here on this guitar. You can see here on the lower bout where there's some other indentations. But if you can live with a few light impressions and dings, this guitar is actually in pretty good shape. Again, you've got scratches on the pick guard, but hey, that's why it's there. Now, these guitars are famous for cracking right here, and this one's not necessarily an exception. Now, when I press on this, I don't feel any flex, so I really think that's just the two-piece top join line showing, but I do want you to be aware that it is there. Again, I don't feel any flex with it, and it lines up directly with that center piece. Bridge doesn't show any signs of lifting. I mean, the guitar is 12 years old. It's still in good enough shape to play it up and down the neck. The action is very nice, definitely very usable. Back of the headstock, our serial number is 03426910. Now what's kind of interesting on this one is Gibson messed up. They accidentally double stamped the serial number and the Made in USA stamp. If I hold it in the light just right, you can see it faintly right above it. What I'm guessing happened is the machine was in the wrong position when it came down to stamp it, and the custom shop guys were like, oh no, this is a custom ordered guitar. I don't want to have to remake this neck that we specifically made for this guitar that we're not currently making production models of. So they just restamped it, shipped it out the door. Personally, if I paid big money to custom order this, I would be kind of upset by that, but now that it's a used instrument, it's just kind of a funny story. You still have your original open back tuners, very vintage looking, and you have your Gibson custom shop decal on the back of the headstock. No breaks, cracks, or repairs on this one. You don't really have any major nicks or dings on the neck. You've got just some light average play wear. I would say it's a fairly thin feeling neck. I mean, it's not SG thin, but it's kind of like a 60s to a 60s medium if you're used to Les Pauls. I believe in the acoustic world, they would call this a C-shaped neck. Now from the factory, they put the strap buttons here. It looks a little goofy, but hey, that's where they put them on this model. Now the back, I love this. Figured mahogany, looks great. You don't see that on Les Pauls too often, so it's always nice to see it on an acoustic. Now the back is not in perfect shape. You can see you've got some scratches and polishing swirls, quite a few of them to be honest, and a little bit of buckle worming marks as well. So again, you don't have to be scared to play this one. This would be a great one if you wanted to gig with it, because again, you do have the option to plug it in. You can do that at the bottom strap pin, and I thought it sounded great through my Gibson Gold Tone, even though it's not necessarily an acoustic amp. But the back just has average wear and tear. And now we'll take a look at the sides. You've got, once again, some scratches, some fingerprint smudges. It's just a well-loved guitar. It wasn't necessarily looked after, with extreme care. Somebody bought this to be a playing instrument, And that's exactly what they did with it. Now we'll do a blacklight test. You can see the top is glowing the way we would expect to see. And we'll take a look at that seam line. Here's where you'd be able to tell if it was a crack or not. And it does not appear to be one in my eyes. The face of the headstock also has the even glow that we're looking for. Back of the guitar, once again, also an even glow. No breaks, cracks, or repairs. No real finish wear to disclose here. Everything is glowing the way I would expect to see, as is the back. Now right here, it kind of looks like maybe somebody had some papers in the case and it made the finish age a little bit differently under blacklight, but in regular lighting situations, you do not see that. Sides of the guitar are also glowing the way I would want to see. So overall, this guitar definitely passes the blacklight test. This guitar comes with its original Gibson acoustic hardshell case. Gibson does a great job with their acoustic cases. I usually like them. You've got 4 latches on the front and a functioning handle. And this one's got some light wear and tear, scuffing just from storage wear, I would say. There's nothing that would really affect this case's ability to protect your instrument though. And then the interior is this sweet blue color. It really does complement the spruce top pretty well in my opinion. And I mean, the case, it's a case. It holds your guitar and it has a compartment in there as well as a double neck rest. And you also have all the paperwork that documents that this is a custom ordered instrument. You even have the original receipt showing this was custom ordered at a Guitar Center. And you can see that new with case after tax, it was almost $3,200. These are your warranty cards, as well as the pre-pack checklist, as well as the letters confirming that they received the order, as well as receiving the warranty registration. If you think you might be interested in owning this custom ordered mahogany back and sides Nick Lucas reissue guitar, feel free to contact me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Troglys, Troglys. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.